I begin my Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman by creating my customizable avatar character. I choose to take advantage of the customization options by deciding not to use any of them. I will proceed with the default name and portrait. For my character build, I decide to make Chris into a knight. For the background, I choose Priest Child with a +2 defense. Then I choose Beauty for the +1 base and 10% growth for skill and speed, and finally Recluse for a +15% strength growth. I sally forth and proceed to die in the prologue 4 times in a row. Lunatic Difficulty is bullshit.
I hate this game.
Prologue 1 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman features only 2 enemies and even fewer decisions to make. I defeat the first soldier and then move on to fight Jagan, the first boss. Fortunately, to my understanding, the first few prologue chapters in Fire Emblem 12 are secretly rigged so the bosses will never crit you, so there is no chance of dying instantly on the first chapter by a 1% Jagan crit. I defeat him without much fanfare. Prologue 2 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman is also barely a chapter because there is really only one way to play through it. Just like most of the prologue, you start inside of a map that is so small that it is comparable in size to a New York City apartment that costs $5,000 a month. Luke targets Ryan, so I run him to a fort and use a vulnerary. While he does this, I hit him with Chris until he dies. Fortunately, I am blessed with a great level up, giving me the 3 speed I need to not get doubled by fighters in Prologue 3. I repeat the same process for Roderick to complete the chapter. Prologue 3 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman can be accurately described as a knife fight in a phone booth with 8 participants. There is hardly any room to maneuver in this 7x9 tile map. I form my units into a Tetris T-block formation and trade Luke and Roderick's weapons. This ensures that the AI will line up in a way that does not result in instant death. I switch to a square formation and use vulneraries on everyone to survive the onslaught. After manipulating the AIs to my whims, Sita uses her vast experience as one of the few survivors of the previous war to be defeated for XP. Prologue 4 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman gives us a choice between saying whether or not we are aware of Prince Marth's atrocities in the previous war. The actual results of this question are not a war crimes tribunal, but rather a choice between 2 maps and being able to recruit either Gordon or Athena for the prologue.
As a friend,
I choose to stay silent about the war crimes and recruit Athena, both in fear of retaliation and also because Athena is a much more useful unit in the prologue. In the actual chapter, Ryan crits the only archer of the map, and then I use Chris to brainlessly tank through the remainder of the enemies. Prologue 5 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman is quite difficult. By this chapter, even your stronger units can only take 2 hits before dying, and some even get 1 shot. The enemies are aggressive and have overlapping attack ranges, often requiring some lucky dodges or intentional sacrifice. I decide to use my less useful units as bait to divert attention, and Roderick is successfully sacrificed for my tactical benefit. Characters who die in the prologue do not die for real, but I will have ample opportunity to kill them permanently when the main story starts up. Prologue 6 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman is another of the few times when a Fire Emblem game offers you a meaningful choice. Here, you can pick between fighting Ogma or Draug, recruiting the one that you fight for the rest of the prologue. Ogma is the better unit, but Draug has an easier map, so I decide to pick Draug. I arrange my units in a formation that leaders only the first 2 soldiers on the first turn. This allows me to take down each of the enemies one by one without any losses. Prologue 7 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman gives us another weird dialogue choice that decides the next map. This time the choice is between recruiting either Kain or Est. This time, I decided to choose Kane's map because it is much easier to funnel XP into Chris there. Chris is quite strong by this point, so I can just park him on the fort without thinking too hard. I blocked the eastern fort with Sita to stop a Pegasus Knight reinforcement. I cleared the map, and by the end of the chapter, I have gotten Chris a level 10, and he has 18 defense. Chris's reputation for breaking the game in half is clearly well deserved. Prologue 8 of this Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Ironman is perhaps one of the most difficult maps in the entire game. It features cramped spaces, powerful enemies, weak player units, and area-based enemy aggression. Moving below this line will result in nearly every enemy attacking you all at once. Using aggressive turtling strategies, I managed to make it to the last group without any casualties. But then, I decided to use Kane as a guided missile to hit Katarina and lure the last 5 enemies into rage. After he gets vaporized in retaliation, Cecile, Ryan, and Merrick suffer similar fates for the greater good. I make it out of the prologue with 5 losses, but I am otherwise intact. Chapter 1 of this Lunatic Ironman sees all of our defeated comrades revive with a dark necromantic spell. However, because the Altaian army lacks health insurance, we are charged a fee of 1,000 gold per loss, so we begin with only 5,000 gold. I use this gold to buy 2 Draco shields and give them to Chris, who will be doing most of the work for the early game. I gave myself all of the DLC items and decided to hold off on using the growth or bond drop for the time being. I make sure to recruit Marisha, a cleric whose main personality traits include lusting after a serial killer and being able to use a hammer and staff. After being fatally wounded, Cecile, Luke, and Roderick notice several person-shaped holes in the ground. They recognize on an instinctual level that these holes are made for them, and they crawl inside, never to be seen again. After witnessing this bizarre sight, Marth triggers Lawrence's self-destruct sequence by talking to him. Chapter 2 of this Lunatic Ironman introduces replacement units and also time travel. The House Everyone feature operates on real time and can be done for some pretty useful rewards, such as free items and bonus XP. If you mess with your system clock, you can greatly accelerate this process. Note that you cannot get any gold or level ups from this feature. Replacement units are generic characters with low stats given to you to fill your roster if you have lost too many units. In Fire Emblem 12, they are generally quite weak. In this chapter, we get 2 replacement units and also recruit Catcher and Cord, who are pretty good units that can be used for triangle attack shenanigans. As I confront the first wave of enemy archers and cavaliers, I feel charitable enough to recruit Warren. Continuing my generous streak, I proceed to donate to Warren, Drought, Gordon, Ryan, Uno, and Dua's Body is the Science. Chapter 3 of this Lunatic Ironman features Pala, one of the best units in the game because of her early joining time, superb bases, and excellent growths. She's even a part of the Pala Catcher S triangle attack that can be useful for taking down Medius. In Lunatic Difficulty, keeping Pala alive is fairly complicated because she starts deep in enemy lines. In order to ensure her safety, you must lure a squad of Draco Knights south by sending someone to the west, and then... Oh fuck, I forgot to move her. That wasn't in the plan. Anyway, so Pala's dead. In the meantime, Chris marches out into the sea to fight Draco Knights and becomes Sail. He gets to level 20 and promotes into a Berserker. I kill Mathis and recruit Julian and Board. Now that the White Wing Triangle attack is impossible, the Cord Board Barge Triangle attack will likely be the next goal for my roster. Chapter 3X of this Lunatic Ironman is a guidance chapter. In Fire Emblem 12, instead of a death requirement, there are alternative objectives or turn count requirements depending on the difficulty. In Lunatic mode, Chapter 3X's requirements are to either complete the prologue without deaths, or to beat Chapter 3 in under 38 turns. It seems I have unintentionally met the turn count requirement. In this chapter, the assassin Clarice is hunting down all of Marth's allies in the War of Shadows, meaning that she is trying to steal my job. That will not do. These assassins will also be added to my list. This chapter features Riss, but I just leave him to die and instead focus on pumping more XP into Chris. Riss's demise sadly means that we will not have the option to shave Chris's head. A truly disastrous loss. Chapter 4 of this Lunatic Ironman features 5 recruitable characters who begin in dire straits. Ubello, Yulia, Ogma, Sirius, and Castor start on the other side of the map, surrounded by thieves and pirates intent on killing them. If I wanted to save them, I could use Yulia's rescue staff to teleport Chris over to the other side, but nah. All of them die horribly. I once again decided to send Chris to fight everything on the map, but a few enemies slipped through, and they one-shot Katria. Well, shit. Chapter 5 of this Lunatic Ironman features Sita, Barst, and the Hammer Staff. We automatically get Sita, who unfortunately is not as good in this game as she was in Fire Emblem 11, because of lack of strong wing spear targets. I said Board or Cord, I don't remember, to recruit Barst so I can complete the set for the Axe Fighter Triangle attack. The map has many fleeing thieves, including Rickard, who I killed to get the VIP card. If I wanted to get the Parthian early and an extra physics staff, I could have rushed straight in with a Paladin Chris, but fighting multiple mages and George, who has a crit chance against Chris, is risky. Considering how many things went wrong in recent chapters, I decided to take a safer route, by using Draco Knight Chris to fly through the mountains and intercept the thieves without fighting the sniper squad. Using this strategy, I managed to obtain the Hammer Staff safely, and I end the chapter. Chapter 6 of this Lunatic Ironman sees the first serious use of time travel for actual benefit. In the training grounds, you can pay gold to fight an enemy and gain around 30 XP. Since I can accelerate the House Everyone feature, I can get free XP and then level up using the training grounds, effectively allowing me to use it at 1/3 of the usual cost. Here, I used their training bars to a usable level. As the chapter starts, following Altean military doctrine, I leave Frey and Norn behind as bait and hole up in the treasure room to fight the reinforcements. Unfortunately, I get surprised as some enemies have longbows, and they kill Cord, ruining my triangle attack plans forever. To soothe my frustration, I also decided to kill off Board, who is now useless, and also Julian and Sita. Samto shows up with the Star Shard, and I defeat him so I can grab it too. The chapter ends with Mark reflecting on his accomplishments. I skipped chapter 6X since I did not meet the requirements and move on to chapter 7 of the Lunatic Ironman. We start off with Navarre and Fina surrounded by thieves. Navarre isn't that great, but Fina is a useful dancer, so I use a rescue staff to extract her, but she immediately gets eaten by a fire dragon. Navarre dies in the background as I pondered the series of life decisions that led me to this point. I send Chris north to intercept the fleeing thieves, and in the process kill Ashram on turn 1. Somehow, he still manages to appear in a cutscene at the start of turn 2 despite being dead. Chris gets around it and is slowed down enough that I miss most of the treasure and only barely grab the Star Shard. Meanwhile, the fire dragon continues to menace me. I grant Aaron's wish to die in battle and send her north to offer the dragon a tasty treat. I use the rescue staff on Chris and bring him back south to defend the rest of my squad. As the chapter ends, I buy as many hand axes and javelins as I reasonably can. Chapter 8 of this Lunatic Ironman features Hardin, who is invincible because of the Dark Sphere and his loveless marriage. Despite what the cutscenes say, he will never actually go after you in this map, meaning you can turtle to your heart's content. In the battle preps, I train Barst in the hyperbolic time chamber and promote him into a berserker. At the beginning of the chapter, we get Kane, who has gotten better from being burnt to ashes in the prologue. In a nearby village, we can find Bantu, who is comically awful in this game. I decided to keep Kane, but used Bantu and all the generics I had this chapter as shield to protect my main squad while I train Barst as much as possible. This results in Roger succumbing to another case of severe axe poisoning. The boss guarding the seize point in this map is George. He managed to escape my wrath in chapter 5. He will once again temporarily dodge fate, since I decided to recruit him to get a more capable disposable unit than standard generics. In chapter 9 of this Lunatic Ironman, we find Kane, a man barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We have the capability to bend the space-time continuum to get him to level 20 at a small discount. Better, faster, stronger. Mostly because of the growth drop, actually. In the chapter, we must consider aggressive Draco Knights from the north, and hero reinforcements from the south. I run away to the east and hole up in the treasury as is tradition. The boots are distributed to Marth. My next two promotions are Marisha and Kane. I managed to recruit Minerva, who will be useful in the final map, and Etzel, who will be more useful in the immediate future. As a projectile. Chapter 10 of this Lunatic Ironman starts everybody in range of enemy magical artillery. I decided to counter with artillery of my own, prepping Etzel and George as Draco Knight guided missiles. I launch Etzel and George at the left Swarm Bishop and take him down. I fight the other one with Chris. George is shot down by anti-air fire and dies. Etzel somehow survives, but I already put him onto the death counter, so I use Rescue to recruit Merrick and send up Wendell to recruit Arlen and dispose of Wendell shortly afterwards. Normally at the end of the chapter you get the silver card for sparing the clerics, but in Lunatic mode your grand reward is a vulnerary, because this game's idea of difficulty is taking fun toys away from you. Chapter 10X of this Lunatic Ironman is a guidance chapter, achieved by sparing at least 3 clerics in Chapter 10. Not getting the silver card has allowed me to recognize the inherent faults of fiat currency, so I decided to invest into Kane Coin, trademark copyright, a decentralized cryptocurrency stored inside of Kane. I pumped the value of Kane Coin by giving him some stat boosters and by tricking Malice and Dice into investing. I used their blood to cool my crypto mining rig. The legions in this map are a physical manifestation of the price volatility of cryptocurrency and have 17 crit, meaning you can only train high defense units with 17 or more luck here. I try to be cautious, but Kane misses several defense level ups and I make a mistake, resulting in his untimely death after fighting 6 legions in one turn. The value of Kane Coin plummets to 0. All my work and all my money wasted, I decided to abort and leave the chapter by killing the real legion with Chris. In Chapter 11 of this Lunatic Ironman, we enter Henri's Way, meaning we will fight dragons for 4 chapters in a row. Normally, in Fire Emblem 12, dragons have 1 range, but in Lunatic mode, they have 1-2 range, because fuck you. This entire map is a desert, drastically reducing the movement of any ground units. It also has many aggressive flying wyverns with 12 move who are immensely threatening. Currently, I only have 2 combat capable characters, so I huddle everyone else into the corner. Chris intercepts wyverns before they get close, and Barst is on guard duty with a bow. After some close calls, I make it out without any casualties. I put a decent amount of training into Barst by killing Jake and the stationary enemies. As the chapter closes, Tiki confesses her love to Marth, but it turns out it's just Zane pulling an epic prank. Chapter 12 of this Lunatic Ironman is quite challenging and I don't have much room to mess around. This map is filled to the brim with incredibly powerful fire dragons and wyverns, not to mention the deadly area-based ambush reinforcements. If you're not careful or knowledgeable of the map, you stand a good chance of dying instantly. I sent Chris out to fight the initial onslaught and kill Daros in the process. The final and most dangerous group of reinforcements triggers when you approach the boss. Normally, this is avoided by seizing as soon as possible, but I go for a different strat. I positioned Chris, arranged the top and middle reinforcements and occupy the lower forts. I send the generic Antony as a heroic sacrifice to trigger the final group of reinforcements. The plan succeeds, and all reinforcements are either blocked or lured into attacking and being killed by Chris, completing the map. Chapter 13 of this Lunatic Ironman is a more chill chapter because there aren't as many aggressive enemies and the map is covered in snow. Unfortunately, I still only have 2 combat capable units, and training my weaker guys is a risky proposition against tanky ice dragons that have crit chances. We get 3 characters with stupid names at the start of the chapter: Raiden, Belf, and Roberto. Belf and Raiden are actually surprisingly decent, but Roberto was kinda bad. We can also recruit Beck, who sadly in this game does not have a ballista. Recognizing my need to kill off at least a few characters every few chapters, and because his name lines up with the iconic voice line from Sekiro, Roberto meets his end. I buy some physics stabs at the secret shop and make sure I move on to the guidance chapter by taking down the thieves. Chapter 13X of this Lunatic Ironman is a guidance chapter, whose requirements are to guard military secrets. Select portions of this report are redacted. This is a map containing and various other. In Fire Emblem 12, you can only see miles away and have no means of improving your vision. Enemies must be sighted before you can attack them, but they can attack you with impunity. In this chapter, joins, but is much less useful than she was in the prologue. I sacrifice and as spotters to defeat the enemy, and I make sure to grab the shield, which is critically important for Chapter 14 of this Lunatic Ironman is a chapter where you will normally get the Warp Staff, but in Lunatic Difficulty, you instead get a Fortified Staff. This sadly also locks you out of the secret shop in this chapter, and you cannot get the alternative Dragonstones or Tiki or Nagi. At the start of the chapter, we get Zane, who can copy your units, and who will feature prominently in the next chapter. I take down the thief and then set up a defensive formation on the left side. I send the generic Aurelius to trigger area-based enemy aggression and then go to town. Once I clear the map, I go to the central chamber and give Goto the Star Shards, and obtain the Light Sphere and Star Sphere. All the other chambers open and reinforcements come in for the bottom, and I deal with them using the hallway as a choke point. Finally, I recruit Tiki, who is effective against dragon enemies. This will be fantastic utility against the 0 dragons I will have to fight for the next 7 or so chapters. In Chapter 15 of this Lunatic Ironman, I get infinite gold. This chapter has very strong and numerous reinforcements, but I trick a sniper into body blocking nearly all of them. The Yacht Shield allows Chris to fight the enemy horseman on the right safely. This allows me to eventually pick off everything at my leisure. I recruit Est, kill off Dolph, and accidentally lose Minerva. After clearing the map, I go after the real prize, which is the arena. Normally, in Lunatic Difficulty, enemies in the arena are too strong to gain a profit. However, if you use Zane transformed into a capped unit, the matchups you get are much more favorable. I spend 10 hours over 2 days in the arena grinding gold live on stream. I kill Abel and cap out Merrick, Lind, and Arlen by training them with healing staves. By the end of the chapter, I have gained 1 million gold and destroyed the entire Altean economy. In Chapter 16 of this Lunatic Ironman, we retake Altea Castle. I start by spending 100,000 gold, the entirety of the Altea Knights pension fund, to train Est into a capped unit. I then spend 170,000 gold, originally meant for critical road repair and construction, to max Forge Thoron's home. In the chapter, we get Marcellet, who I will keep as bait for the next chapter. I go left and get the Geosphere from the thief. Once the reinforcements spawn, I decide that the best way to fight them is to not fight them at all. I unequip Chris and have him sit at a choke point to break a soldier's weapon. This unarmed soldier gets the other enemies stuck and effectively removes them from the fight.
Oh my god, stop bro, I'm stuck! Can you help me?
I go room by room, clearing everything, eventually taking down the boss without ever needing to fight the reinforcements. Chapter 16X of this Lunatic Ironman is a guidance chapter, whose requirements are having a Chris that is at least promoted to level 5, meaning that anyone who plays this game will always get it. I spend 75,000 gold, taken from the Altean charity for feeding hungry orphans, to forge a dragon pike with max might and hit for the endgame. This map has reinforcements, but you can block them by placing units on the forts. The enemies on this map don't get aggressive unless you go past this line. This makes things slightly complicated if you play like a normal human being, but fortunately I don't have such weaknesses. Vasilin is our proverbial and literal canary into the Shadow Monster Field coal mine, and he dies. I slowly take down the enemies and make sure not to accidentally kill Katarina, who I recruit by talking to her with Chris 3 times. They reminisce about characters that have been dead for 15 chapters. Chapter 17 of this Lunatic Ironman is filled with strong Arcanadian soldiers and weak Grau recruits. The conceit of the map is that the Grau recruits are there unwillingly and that you should spare them. In the battle preps, I spent the entirety of Altea's education budget, 75,000 gold, on forging another dragon pipe with max might and hit. A thief on this map has a Nosferatu tome, but going after him is really not worth it because it triggers extra reinforcements. I clear out the initial Draco Knights, recruit Tomas, and then move down to the final chamber. I decided to spare the Grau soldiers so I can recruit Sheena and Samson to have more warm bodies for future chapters. Since my roster is too big to get disposable replacement units, I will have to substitute them with actual characters. What a time we live in. Chapter 18 of this Lunatic Ironman is a strange but fairly easy chapter. I actually forgot to do a forge of this map for some reason, so oops. The gimmick of this chapter is that you need to rush west to the village to stop the Aurelius Knights from clapping your cheeks. In Lunatic mode, however, there are 4 paladins who can intercept you. I kill one with Est and another with Barst, and I managed to get through. I talked to the King of Aurelius, who doesn't actually have a name and is just called King Aurelius. The reward for this gripping dialogue is the Life Sphere and an intact sphincter. The Aurelian Knights retreat, but they'll be back next chapter. At the start of the chapter, we get Frost. I volunteer him for tribute to trigger enemy aggression. Using my fires, I mess with the enemy pathing to fight smaller groups individually. I defeat them and move on to the next chapter. Chapter 19 of this Lunatic Ironman has some of the hardest recruitments and deadliest reinforcements in the whole game. If you want to recruit the Wolf Guard, you must visit the village to recruit Roche, who recruits Violin, who recruits Sedgar, who recruits Wolf. It is a widely known fact that they are absolutely not worth the effort. There are paladin reinforcements near the starting point, Draco Knights from 3 corners of the map, reinforcements from the palace, and a deadly wave of area-based ambush reinforcements when you get close to the siege point. Let's not forget the high-powered ballistas scattered throughout the map. Fortunately, you can bypass all of this just by killing the boss. I forge a max might hammer for 42,000 gold, depleting funds originally intended for Marth's gambling addiction, and I fly north to revoke the boss's alive license. Roche dies when the village he's in is destroyed by a thief. Violin ceases to exist when the boss kill stops reinforcements, but I do have to kill Sedgar and Wolf manually. I clear the map, consisting mostly of isolated groups of stationary enemies, and I seize to end the chapter. Chapter 20 of this Lunatic Ironman is our final showdown against Hardin, Emperor of Arcania and world-renowned incel. I spend 132,000 gold, money intended to rebuild villages and cities destroyed in the war, to create a maximum forge silver axe. The moment you pass this line, you'll be set upon from both sides by dozens of basically capped units. However, this can be exploited by lacking enough dignity to spend 100 or so turns, exhausting all of the enemy's swarm home and longbow uses. After doing exactly this, I make a gallant charge directly into the treasury, which is no longer under the protection of Swarmtome sages. I spend 30 or so turns breaking enemy weapons to get every single enemy reinforcement stuck and essentially nullified.
What are you doing, Step?
I set up an elaborate turn to kill Hardin and seize the throne in one fell swoop, but this ends up being unnecessary since Barst gets a crit on the first attack and one-shots Hardin. We are on track onto fighting Medius and getting the good ending by some definitions of the term. Chapter 21 of this Lunatic Ironman is a breather chapter for the abject hell that are the next 3 maps. I redirect the funding for Altean medical services, spending all 95,000 gold forging a Brave Lance. This map contains the Starlight, which you need to defeat Garnet in Chapter 23. You don't have much time to get it, since these will come in from the upper left. Aside from this, the map's enemies are largely stationary, so I decided to solid snake it up and sneak along the edges to intercept the thieves. To lighten my roster, I use Tomas as bait, and he dies. We get Ymir, and he goes the way of the dinosaurs by being atomized by a meteor crit. I get the Starlight from Michaelis, who recruits himself into the afterlife because Minerva died in Chapter 15. I end the chapter by going to a seedy alleyway, spending 67,000 gold, taking directly from destitute serfs to buy illicit stat boosters from Anna's secret shop. Remember kids, if a suspicious red-haired woman offers you spirit dust, energy drops, or speed wings, just say no. Chapter 22 of this Lunatic Ironman is a brutal chapter with comically powerful reinforcements. In addition to the dragons, there are sorcerers with forged glower tomes that deal 40 damage and ignore resistance. The only way to win is to go as fast as you can. I spend 127,000 gold forging a Brave Axe, depleting the funds for Marth's body cleanup and disposal crew, making it impossible to hide all the evidence. I give my stat boosters to Tiki to make her into a cat monstrosity that can one-shot dragons. I destroy the enemies in front of me with my forged weapons, using the anew staff several times to take out key targets. I make it to the final chamber, which is an absolute mind-wrenching, blind prey to destroying sadistic hellhole death trap that will result not only in the deaths of your entire team, but also everyone related to you 4 generations above and below. The only way to survive is to seize on the turn to open the door. Fortunately, I came in with a plan. I opened the door, cleared the way with Chris, sacrificed Samson for no reason, move Martha in, use Anew on Chris to one-shot the boss, and then use Anew on Martha to seize the throne. In chapter 23 of this lunatic Ironman, we lure Garneth into the wilderness so we can PK him for his rune scimitar. I spend 62,000 gold forging a maximite Thoron tome, defunding the Altean Ministry of Truth. Normally in this chapter, you can get a second hammer and staff and also an alms staff, which can resurrect a character, but they are unavailable in Lunatic Difficulty. I blast my way through the map with my forged weaponry and stat-boosted mannequins, but Medea and Belf tragically lose their lives on the approach to Garneth's gamer cave. I have Sheena send Garneth a PM offering to be his RuneScape GF for 10,000 GP. She tells him that they should meet in the wilderness and that he should bring his most valuable items and show them off for a YouTube video. Sheena dies to an unrelated NPC, but Garneth has been successfully lured. I proceed to skill trick Garneth and then jump him, ice barraging and AGS spanking him into oblivion. I loot his body and I get his spade and a rune scimitar. The falchion. In the final chapter of this lunatic Ironman, I defeat Medius with the power of capitalism. By this point, I have spent 1 million gold on manufacturing genetically engineered super soldiers and weapons of mass destruction. I have 13 characters left, which is one too many to deploy, so I decide to kill off Katarina in the drill grounds. I spend the last 63,000 of my gold, originally meant for the Altean secret police, to forge one last dragon pike. We will fight Medius, 24 dragons, and 2 to 4 more as ambush spawn reinforcements every turn until the end of time. To avoid this, most people will try to one-turn the chapter by saving the 4 mind control clerics for extra staff actions. But I can only recruit one of them, since Sirius, Minerva, and Julian are already dead. I must instead brute force my way through and fight the dragons head on. I begin by retreating to the bottom and letting the enemies spread themselves out. I then surge forward with a devastating counterattack, wiping out 11 dragons in one turn. I keep pushing until I get into range of Medius. I have Raiden and Est cure Nina, Lena, and Maria of their hypnosis by using the generic medication, which is a bullet to the back of the head. Shortly afterwards, the Colonel tells Raiden to turn the game off and he exits the simulation. I then move in for the kill. I have Merrick recruit Ellis and then perform a kamikaze attack with a max force Thoron tome. This devastating uppercut with the invisible hand of the free market crits and deals 75 damage. Medius claps back with a market correction, completely obliterating Merrick's portfolio and extinguishing his life. I recognize now that I have more than enough power to defeat Medius, so I decided to go for the greater victory by winning with fewer people left alive. I wait one turn, resulting in Ellis and Lynn's deaths from ambush spawn dragons. Arlen, Marisha, Tiki, and Nagi attack Medius for minimal damage and die on the retaliation. I have Marth attack for 0 damage and then deal the final blow with Chris, defeating Medius and beating the game with a mere 96 characters dead and an impressive 5 characters left alive. This concludes my Lunatic Ironman for Fire Emblem 12, New Mystery of the Emblem, Heroes of Light and Shadow. After nearly 2 months of work and around 40 videos produced, I have beaten the game with a perfect E ranking in speed, survival, and tactics. This was quite the run, utilizing nearly every kind of exploit and cheese strategy possible, and honestly, has been the most fun I've had in Fire Emblem in ages. I eventually plan to revisit the game to do an Ironman on reverse lunatic difficulty, using other cool things I've learned but never got the chance to use. But at the moment, I would like to let the game rest a little. If you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel or following me on Twitter. If you would like to support the channel, please consider donating to my Patreon or by becoming a channel member. If you have any ideas or perks that will interest you, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks a lot, and please look forward to my future projects. See you in the next one.